Shalom Rav. As part of our ongoing series on war and peace, we are very proud and privileged and honored to have in our studio today Ambassador Daniel Shapiro, the American ambassador to Israel. Ambassador Shapiro arrived to Israel in July of last year, 2011, but he has been involved with Middle Eastern affairs for quite a few years in various branches of the American government, and also was a student of Middle East at Harvard University. But we would like to talk with him about American role, both in the Middle East, but also in the world at large. After the end of the Cold War, Mr. Ambassador, the United States emerged as the kind of leader of the international system, providing collective goods in various areas of both peace, security, economic, and so on. But in recent years, there's been a growing debate, in some places concern, some places, maybe other places, maybe people less worried about it, but supposedly American decline in the international system, that due to the rise of the emerging power, notably China, Brazil, India, and so on, and also American involvement in Iraq and Afghanistan, and the economic crisis in the West, including in the United States, that maybe the United States is kind of in a status or situation of a decline in the international system. What is your view about this ongoing debate?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me. It's an honor to be here at חיפה University. I don't see the United States in decline. I see the United States remaining very much the leader of the international community, economically, diplomatically, politically, militarily. That doesn't mean that the system hasn't evolved in some ways. Of course it has, and it doesn't mean we haven't faced some significant challenges, which we also have. It's clear that no country in the modern political system is going to control outcomes by itself. We have found that whenever we have sought to advance our own interests anywhere in the world, we've done so much more effectively when we've done it as part of a coalition. So even when we want to use our leadership, we find that we're more effective doing it in concert with others rather than trying to do it alone. It actually makes us a more effective promoter of our interests, and we've been less effective and brought more burdens on ourselves when we've tried to do it alone. So while we are the leader, that doesn't mean we can be a unilateral actor. It's also true that especially in the last 3 or 4 years, we've faced very significant economic challenges which have strained our own resources and had many Americans focused on our own economy and on getting our own house in order. But even as that has gone on, I think what one finds is that most countries around the world, when they see an international problem, the first place they go, the first place they look is to the United States. Many of the same people who sometimes preach U.S. decline are the first to come to our doorstep and say, you've got to help us, only you can lead us through this system, this challenge. And so I think given the size of our economy, which is now rebounding, given the strength of our military, which certainly is the strongest, given the leadership we have provided, especially to the community of democracies and the sort of those countries oriented toward the same kinds of values of peace and security and democracy that we believe in, I think the United States is very much going to remain the leader.
Yeah, I think definitely a military power. I mean, there's second to none, the United States in its military supremacy in the international system. But now, I mean, Congress and the administration really agreed about major cuts in defense spending. $500 billion the next decade or so, and still even talks about additional cuts. Do you think it will affect American power projection to the various parts of the world, or do you think still the United States will be able to maintain its dominance in this military security sphere?
I still think, as I said, we'll remain the leader, but we do have to make choices. I mean, that's simply a fact of life, that we have become somewhat overextended. We were in Iraq for about 9 years. For much of that time, we were essentially not paying for our own deployment in Iraq. We were borrowing money for it. That's not sustainable. That's not sustainable for any power. And so now that we have removed our military from Iraq, and as we begin to reduce our presence in Afghanistan, we will have to make some choices. And it may be that we will not be exactly present in the same numbers or the same force structures as we've been in certain parts of the world. At the same time, I think we have very strong commitments to our allies in NATO, and will remain an important presence in Europe. We have very strong commitments to our allies in Asia, South Korea and Japan and Australia, and will remain a very active Pacific power. And I don't see any reason to believe that we will not also remain very strongly present in the Middle East. We have a very robust military presence in the Persian Gulf, in other parts of this region. Of course, you know of our very intense military cooperation and coordination with Israel and with other parties in this region. I see all of that continuing. Again, some choices will have to be made, some prioritization, perhaps some change in structure and some reductions in certain places, but the overall picture, I think, will remain a United States that's able to project power where it needs to defend its interests and its allies in any region.
But it seems like, including a statement by President Obama and especially Secretary Hillary Clinton, there's going to be kind of a shift in the focus of American grand strategy. Namely, there will be a much greater focus on East Asia, and seems to be maybe less as a result of it, as a result of the limited resources even for the United States, less focus to some extent on the Atlantic, Europe, and the Middle East. Even there's a decision about disengaging 2 American brigades from Europe back to the US, and obviously the disengagement from Iraq and in a couple of years from Afghanistan. Does it mean that really the United States will focus now in Asia, both in the security as well as in the economic, because it's such an important and growing region?
Yeah. Well, again, we will have to make some choices. Europe doesn't face the same kinds of threats that it faced during the Cold War, and so I think it's understandable that we might take a different look at what sort of presence we actually have physically in Europe, how we continue to meet our NATO treaty obligations, which of course we will. Asia really is a very dynamic region, and it's where much of the economic growth of the world is occurring. It's where we have a number of key allies. It's where we have I guess a friendly competitor in China, and therefore it's important for us to be able to be present there as well as China continues to develop. But I've never thought of expanding our focus on Asia coming at the expense of our presence in the Middle East. We've already done something in our own interest, which was end our presence in Iraq. That's already a significant change. But we haven't in any other measure changed our presence in the Gulf and our ability to bring power to bear as it's required. I don't think the right way to judge this is to suggest that the United States leaving Iraq and Afghanistan is somehow a lessening of our commitments in the Middle East. Permanent occupation of Iraq and Afghanistan is certainly not in the United States' interest, it's certainly not sustainable, and it's not in Iraqis or Afghanis' interest as well. But having a strong, in fact, not having our presence on the ground in those countries actually makes us more flexible, more nimble, more able to move the power that we do have present in the Gulf and from elsewhere into the region if we need to, wherever it's required. In fact, I think what we found was that we were more pinned down by those large deployments than we will be in the future.
Thus far, we focus on the hard power component of American power. But not less important for U.S. standing in the world system has been the soft power, the attraction of the American model, democracy, institution, values, and also the economic prosperity and the great success of the American model. And many people all over the world, many states, were attracted to that model as opposed, for example, to the Soviet model. And that was one reason maybe for the victory, kind of quote-unquote, in the Cold War. Do you think that due to the economic crisis in the West, and including in the United States, there is somewhat lessening in the soft power, in the attraction to the American model in various parts of the world?
Well, I don't think we can or do try to claim that we're immune from economic challenges, and of course we're not. We are experiencing them along with most of the rest of the world, and that's a reality that brings. But I think it's a reality. It's not exactly a flaw in the American model. Simply as something that is a cycle that we go through. And of course, we've been through these economic downturns before, and we've always rebounded. The strength of our people, our education system, our innovation, our technology, our military has always been an engine that's been able to bring us out of these economic challenges, and I think it will again. As far as our sort of broader reputation around the world goes, I believe it's still the case that many people around the world look to the United States as a model culturally, as a model in its political system. We don't believe we have all the answers and that everyone needs to copy us, but I do think the values that are being articulated by those trying to overthrow non-democratic regimes, whether in the Arab world or elsewhere, often contain very significant echoes and are very much inspired by the kind of principles that we have stood for and we've tried to advance and tried to be partners with countries like Israel in furthering over many decades. So I think we're still very much an influential player, an influential soft power as well, and you still have so many people from around the world who want to study in the United States, look for an opportunity to get a visa and travel there, maybe even get a green card and work there. I think that tells us a lot about what people think of the United States.
Another major component of American standing in the world has been the domestic support, domestic commitment, especially kind of post-Pearl Harbor and after World War II, the commitment to American engagement, both security and economic and so on in the world. Do you think, or there are some people who argue that now there are growing kind of isolationist voices and elements in American society and American political system, reflected maybe by the Tea Party and other kind of that say that America has to focus on its own nation building and its own affairs rather than being engaged in the world at large?
I think there's a bit of a cyclical aspect to this, and that at times of economic stress, people are quite understandably focused on dealing with our own problems. I think at times of feeling that our resources are overstretched, as maybe has been the case in recent years with the Iraq and Afghanistan engagements, people are looking to bring some of those resources home, or at least downsize what is deployed overseas. At the same time, I really don't see a strong isolationist strain coming into effect, because I think in a modern age of international trade, of global communications, of even small countries or even non-state actors' ability to cause serious threats to us or to our allies or to our forces, I think the vast majority of Americans understand that we couldn't isolate ourselves if we tried. If we tried, the problems would come and find us. And so it remains in our interest to be actively involved internationally, to maintain alliances, to maintain the ability to project force around the world, to be global economic partners and players with the widest range of international trade partners that we can, and to try to bring as many other countries into that same international system. So I don't see a significant strain of isolationism even as we tackle our own internal challenges.
That's a very reassuring message, I think, to the Israeli people. Another key question that emerged after the end of the Cold War is the question of intervention. Intervention in domestic affairs of other states, notably under the title of humanitarian intervention or responsibility to protect. And again, the United States was the leader, for example, in the Balkans, in Bosnia in 95, in Kosovo in 99, leading this humanitarian intervention. However, when the question of Libya came in 2011, it seemed like the American administration, led by President Obama, was a little bit hesitant and reluctant. And then came this ID expression, leading from behind. And obviously, with regard to Syria, it seems to be the reluctance to intervene. Do you think there has been a change because of all these changes in the world and so on, and now there is much greater reluctance in the United States to engage in humanitarian intervention in other states where the government persecutes its own people, like what's going on in some cases of the Arab Spring, for example?
Well, I think we see that we do have a moral responsibility when a government is using large-scale violence against its people to do everything we can to try to prevent it. That doesn't mean we have the same tools available in every situation, and I think the Libya and the Syria situations are an important example of that. In Libya, where an opposition group had emerged that controlled a defined territory in a fairly sparsely populated and wide open area, and where you had partners with resources nearby and also interests, and I'm talking about our European partners in NATO, with an ability to bring force to bear in a way that could decisively protect a population. I think that is a tool that we felt it was important to use, and indeed that was the decision that was made, and it may well have saved many lives as the Libyan army was pushed back from Benghazi at a time when Gaddafi was threatening a wholesale slaughter if his forces took the city. In Syria, we don't really have those same tools. The opposition is much harder to define. It doesn't control as a defined territory. It's the international tools and will and coalition and sort of physical abilities to intervene are considerably limited. But what we have tried to do is bring maximum pressure to bear on the Syrian government through economic sanctions, through diplomatic isolation, with partners in Europe, with Turkey, with the other Arab states, to pressure that government, first of all, to end the violence, but second of all, to leave. And we do think the Assad government is going to leave. It is using horrific violence against the Syrian people. They deserve for that to end and for a chance to build a future in a post-Assad government. We hope that government would be a more responsible and responsive government to its people. I think there are some challenges in just getting that opposition to coalesce into an alternative that won't simply just devolve into chaos in a post-Assad Syria. But we're trying to work with the opposition as well as increase the isolation on the Syrian government to end the massacre as quickly as possible.
The United States has been always in favor of democracy promotion, and President Bush, Junior Bush, became a key objective after 9/11 of its strategy. Then President Obama came to power, seems to be a little bit more reluctant or hesitant about this democracy promotion. And now, as a result of the Arab Spring, it seems like Islamist forces are rising as a result of free and fair elections. Do you think how the United States will reconcile this kind of commitment, huge commitment to democracy, on the other hand, kind of the realpolitik problems and other issues engaged with, with democracy and democratization, especially in the first stages of democratization?
Right. Well, we've remained, I think, in many ways through both administrations, very committed to the idea that the advancement of democracy is in our interest, and it also is a realization of the rights of people everywhere, to have governments that respect their rights, that do not violate their rights, and that are governed in a responsive, transparent, democratic way. So that hasn't changed. I think we've tried to approach all of these situations with a certain humility, which is to say that we don't believe that we can, as an outside actor, determine the fate of a given society or install a government in those societies. We have tried that in some places. Generally, we've had fairly poor results when we have tried that. And so as the transitions in the Arab world have unfolded, we have taken a view that what we should do is stand very clearly for certain principles. Principles that these people in these countries, in every country, deserve governments that don't use violence against them, that respect their universal rights of freedom of speech and freedom of assembly and freedom of religion and association, that are protective of the rights of women and ethnic minorities, and that are responsible international actors, particularly in the case of Egypt, that they will respect their treaty obligations with Israel, not allow their territory to be used by terrorist organizations. We should stand for those principles. We should support those voices and those actors within the society who share them. We should encourage all other actors in the society to adopt them, and that is what we're doing. And we should use the tools of influence we have. We've certainly let everyone in Egypt know that our own relationship with Egypt will very much be affected by what kind of government emerges and whether or not it abides by those principles. But at the same time, we also understand that we will not control that outcome. The Egyptian people, the Syrian people, the Libyan people, the people in those societies will ultimately control those outcomes. And so while we will stand for principles, we will support those who stand for them, we will try to steer and encourage all actors in that direction. At the end of the day, it's going to be decided by those people in that society.
Ambassador Shapiro, I would like to thank you very much for this comprehensive kind of overview of some of the key issues in American security and foreign policy. And I think it's very important for the Israeli people to learn about this American commitment, because our relations are so important for Israeli security. So it's very important for us to know that the United States will still continue to be the leading force in the international system, and we are sure it's going to be leading force for the good, collective goods of the international community. Thank you very much for devoting your time for this purpose, and appreciate your analysis.
It's been a great pleasure. Toda rabba.
Toda rabba.